Today's notes are about setting up and solving proportions. Remember, if I'm going too quickly, just pause and rewind. If you have any questions, ask your teacher. So first we're going to talk about just some basic vocab that we need to know. A proportion is an equation that shows two ratios are equal or equivalent. So the example to the right there has 1/2 equals 50 over 100. If you were to simplify 50 over 100, you would get 1/2. Therefore, they are equal. A cross product is the answer obtained from multiplying the numerator of one of our ratios or one of our fractions by the denominator of the other. Usually we'll just call this cross multiplying. So when we tell you to cross multiply, that's what we're talking about. And another important thing about cross products is that when something is proportional, our cross products are going to be equal. So I want to go back up to that example in the upper right hand corner. If I find my cross products, like 2 times 50, which gives us an answer of 100, and my other cross product, which is 1 times 100, which also gives us an answer of 100, you'll see these cross products are equal. They both equal 100. Therefore, I know that that's a proportional relationship. The final thing that I want to remind you about is that a variable is a letter that we use to represent an unknown value. So in math class, when we don't know a number, we represent it with a letter. So actually setting up and solving these proportions, the very first thing we want to do is look at our question. We want to look at what is it asking us to find, because whatever it's asking you to find, that's going to be your variable. It's the thing you don't know. Then we're going to set up our proportions. So our first fraction should be information that we know and is somehow directly related to each other. So usually that's going to be found in the same sentence or very, very close to each other in the word problem. Our second fraction should have our variable in it, so then the number we don't know, the thing we're trying to find. And it should be set up the same way as the first fraction, so we have to stay consistent. That's going to make a lot more sense when we do the examples on the back. Once we get it set up, we're going to start solving. There's really only 2 steps to solving it. First is we are going to cross multiply. After we do that and get our cross products, the second and final step is that we are going to divide by the number attached to our variable. So this allows us to get our variable alone, and we want to make sure we do this to both sides. Whatever you do to one, you do to the other. Finally, since we are dealing with word problems most of the time, we want to make sure that we label our units. At the bottom there, it says you can check your answer by plugging in your solution and then cross multiplying. So here's kind of all of that process shown to you in a picture. We've got the proportion 8 over x equals 6 over 15. And the very first step is we are going to find our cross products. So 8 times 15 and x times 6. 8 times 15 gives us 120, and x times 6 gives us 6x. Since we don't know the value of x, we cannot make one up. We've just got to continue using x. Step 2 is to divide by the number attached to x. This time it's by 6. So 120 divided by 6 gives us 20. And really quickly, I want to talk about how we got rid of the 6 there. So if we are dividing 6x by 6, basically we're doing 6 divided by 6, which is 1. And our x value is still there. 1x is the same as just x. So when we're dividing 6x by 6, those 6's basically just cancel out. Again, at the bottom there, we can check our solution here in red by plugging in our number of 20 for x. Then we check our cross products. 8 times 15 is 120, and 20 times 6 is 120. Since I get the same number for my cross products, I know that I did it correctly. Flipping to the back where our actual examples are, we have our first one is set up for us. So this first one is actually going to be the easiest one we do because it's already set up. Since it's set up, we can move straight on to solving. And step 1 of solving is to cross multiply. So I'm going to do 5 times x and 85 times 40. 5 times x is just 5x, but we can actually work out 85 times 40. Now my first number I'm multiplying with there is 0. 0 times anything is just 0. So I'm going to go to my second number and use my placeholder. 4 times 5 is 20, carry the 2. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 2 is 34. When you add your rows, you see you get 3,400. So that's my cross product on that side. After cross multiplying, step 2, the final step is to divide. So I'm going to divide by the number attached to x. This time it's a 5. 5x divided by 5 gives me just x. We need to set up and solve long division to figure out what 3,400 divided by 5 is. So 5 cannot go into 3, but it can go into 34 6 times with 4 left over. Bring down the next digit. 5 can go into 48 times with nothing left over. However, I do still have one last digit to bring down. 5 can go into 0 times. So that means that x equals 680. The last thing I need to do is think about my labels. When I look back at my proportion, I have hours on both fractions at the bottom. That must mean dollars is on both fractions at the top, and my answer must be $680. Moving on to example B. Tammy can run 3 miles in 0.8 hours. How long will it take her to run 9 miles? So this one's a little trickier because it's not set up for us. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at my question. It's asking me how long. That's what I'm trying to find. I don't know how long. So my variable, I'm just going to use x. A length of time that we're using here is hours. So my variable is going to be hours. If you wanted to use x or h or any other letter, it would work. Now I'm going to work on setting up my proportions. So my first fraction should be information I know that goes together. Usually it's found in the same sentence. So looking at the beginning, it says she can run 3 miles in 0.8 hours. That information goes together. 3 miles in 0.8 hours. My second fraction should be set up exactly like the second one. So x is for hours. If I look at how I set up the first one, my hours is on the bottom, so x should go on the bottom. My other value I know is this 9 miles. Since 3 miles is on the top, 9 miles should go on the top as well. So what I mean by setting it up the same way and being consistent is that we've got miles on the top and hours on the bottom for both of our ratios. Now we can solve. I can cross multiply. 3 times x is 3x. We need to figure out what 0.8 times 9 is though. So I am going to set that up. 0.8 times 9. 9 times 8 is 72. I'm going to put my 2 down, carry the 7. 9 times 0 is 0, plus 7 is 7. I've got one number behind the decimal, so I'm going to move it in 1 time. That means that 0.8 times 9 is 7.2. I still need to get x alone, so my second and final step to solve a proportion is to divide by the number that's attached to x. This time it's a 3. 3x divided by 3 is just x. We need to figure out what 7.2 divided by 3 is. Bring the decimal up. 3 can go into 7 2 times with 1 left over. 3 can go into 12 4 times with nothing left over. Therefore, my answer is 2.4. And I want to go back and think about my labels. On the top was miles. On bottom where x was, my label was hours. So 2.4 hours is my answer for that one. Example C. Kevin makes $22.50 in 3 hours. How long would it take him to make $375? Again, I'm looking at the question part, and it's similar to last time. It says how long. I don't know the length of time. That's going to be my variable. I'm using x. You can use a different letter. And my length of time for this problem is in hours. So now I can set up my proportion. My first fraction is things I know that go together. So I start at the beginning. Kevin makes $22.50 in 3 hours. That goes together. It's talking about the amount of money made in a certain amount of time. So I'm going to put $22.50 on top and 3 hours on bottom. When I go to set up my second fraction, I need to stay consistent. So the other amount I know here is $375. Since dollars is on the top of my first fraction, I'm going to put $375 on the top. Since hours is on the bottom in my first fraction and x stands for hours, x is going to go on the bottom. Now I can cross multiply 22.50 times x. is 22.50x. And 375 times 3, I've got to work that out. 3 times 5 is 15, carry the 1. 3 times 7 is 21, plus 1 is 22, carry the 2. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11. So it's 1,125. I need to get x alone. In order to do that, I need to divide by the number attached to x. So this time I'm dividing by 22.50. 22.50x divided by 22.50 is just x. They cancel each other out. We've got to figure out the other problem, though. I've set up long division, and you should notice that my number on the outside, I have a decimal in it, so I'm going to move it 2 times to the right. I have to do the same thing to my other number. So now I have 2,250 on the outside. And I'm going to write my original number, but I have 2 empty spaces that I need to fill in with zeros. Now, this is a really tricky multiplication or division problem. I'm dealing with 2,250. That's a really, really big number. So let's go through what we know. We know it can't go into 1. It can't go into 11. It can't go into 112. And it also cannot go into 11,125. So I'm going all the way over to 11,250. I'm dealing with really, really big numbers here. So I am actually going to round this 2250 to an easier number to work with. I'm going to round it to 2,000. Now I can count up by 2,000s to see how close I can get to basically like 11,000. So it's like counting up by 2s. 2,000, 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, 12,000. It's going to be between 5 and 6. I know it's going to go in between 5 and 6 times. To figure out exactly, I'm actually going to have to do the multiplication. So I'm going to start by doing times 5, and if it doesn't work, I'll try times 6. So I've got 2250 times 5. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 5 is 25, carry the 2. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12, carry the 1. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. This actually happens to be a perfect match. So it goes in 5 times, and when I subtract, I get nothing left over. But I still have one more digit to bring down. Similar to an earlier problem, 2,250 cannot go into 0, so it goes in 0 times. I don't have any more digits to bring down. I don't have a remainder, so I actually have my answer. X equals 50. The last thing I need to check is my label. On the top of my fractions, I had dollars. On the bottom where X is, my label was hours. So this is actually X equals 50 hours. Our final example here. If you can, I would try setting this up on your own and then checking it with your teacher. But it says a 16-foot tall tree has a shadow that is 28 feet long. How long of a shadow would a 6-foot man cast? So again, I'm asking how long, but this time it's not talking about time. It's talking about how long the shadow is. So X is the length of shadow. So I need to now set up my proportion. My first fraction is going to be information I know that goes together. It's usually found in the same sentence. So if I go back to the beginning, a 16-foot tall tree has a shadow that's 28 feet long. One thing I want to point out is that the 16 is how tall and the 28 is for the shadow. That's going to help me set up later. So on the top, I have how tall it is, and on the bottom, I have the length of the shadow. So when I go to fill in my other fraction, the other number I know is the 6-foot tall man. That's how tall he is. So since it's the height of someone, I'm going to put it on the top, just like the height or how tall the tree was. Since X is the length of shadow and 28 was also a length of shadow, they will both be on the bottom. Now that I've got it set up, I can cross multiply. 16 times X is 16X. And 28 times 6, I need to figure out. 6 times 8 is 48, carry the 4. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 4 is 16, so it's 168. I need to get x alone by doing division, so I'm going to divide by 16 on both sides. 16 divided by 16 cancels out, leaving me with x. I need to figure out what 168 divided by 16 is. 16 cannot go into 1, but it can go into 16 one whole time with nothing left over, but I do have to bring down my other digit. 16 cannot go into 8, so I basically say it goes in 0 times. Now to keep going, I could either make a fraction or a decimal. I'm going to do it as a decimal, so I'm going to add a decimal and a 0 and bring that 0 down. 16 can go into 80 5 times perfectly. That means that x equals 10.5. Now I need my label. It just so happens that all of these have a label of feet because I'm talking about either how tall or how long a shadow is. So my label of 10.5 will also have a label of feet. The key here is the setup. If we set it up incorrectly, it kind of ruins your whole answer. So if you're ever not sure about the setup, ask your teacher. Check in if you have any questions.